Hello and welcome to episode 44 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is a man who is preparing a Super Bowl ad featuring Morgan Freeman, a mongoose, and an Aston Martin 177, Greendragoon. That's what it should. We also have a man who recently debuted a new line of smart pants at this year's Consumer Electronics Show, Markhawkman.
They only have 3 microprocessors, unfortunately.
And a man who was rejected for a job at S.H.I.E.L.D. because his superpower is shapeshifting into bread, Hippiejohn.
Now you've gone and told everyone what I can do. Now they're not even going to let me on the Great Lakes Avengers.
That's a shame. Our guest tonight is one of my personal favorite Foundry authors. He has the mission that I always hold up as my favorite, which is Personal Reflections, and has created one of everybody's favorite characters, Amanda Barkley. So welcome XR377.
Howdy. I suddenly have a new pair of pants to buy, and will always be afraid of every bread loaf I come across.
Don't eat me.
Always going to be wondering now. Always going to be wondering.
Yeah.
Well, say there hasn't been much Foundry news over the course of the past week, but there was some interesting game news that just came out today. Tim Russ is actually going to be reprising the role of Tuvok in an upcoming mission, which I believe is the anniversary mission coming at the end of January. According to the interview he did with Brandflake's video interview that was posted today being Wednesday, he's going to be an admiral and in command of Voyager. That's pretty much about all the details we have.
So basically,
Well, they did show us a quick shot of his bridge on the Voyager.
Yeah, they showed us what the character looks like.
Well, I was wondering if that wasn't just a shot that was just cooked up right for the video.
It might have been.
And not necessarily
Either way, they've got a
representative.
classic character and a classic setting. That's one of those nice little nostalgia bombs which hooks people, so...
you know what this
The more
means
track
is
records
that
we get. Yeah.
they've finally maybe the opportunity to for Cryptic to update the Intrepid bridge.
Ooh.
Wow,
I've heard
could
that
be.
suggested on the forums. Somebody said, make a Voyager pack with, an updated bridge and, I don't know, some other items and things like that.
I had not thought of that. Wow.
I'd buy it.
See, I think of it as Foundry related. However, I think of it as to me, it's an alteration to the story. It's a piece of it that we didn't know. We didn't know that Admiral Tuvok was in command of Voyager now, and now we do, and people can now use that in their story writing, which I think is a pretty cool thing. So
He brings up a
Tuvok
wonderful
is what,
point.
250 now?
he'd be old. Yeah, Tuvok would be way up there.
Yeah, I mean he was on the Excelsior.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, during Star Trek 6. So there's also some other things coming with 8.5, like ship and equipment management systems, the anniversary ships, which will probably be rewards for the mission, shuttle PvP, which I've done before informally, and it was really fun.
Yeah, it is fun to just do that in a shuttle.
Fighters, too, right? It's just the whole small craft?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
small
think
craft.
it's the whole they mentioned in
Captain's
the,
yachts,
yeah,
runabouts,
they
all
mentioned
that.
those.
Interesting.
I think they're going to have to do a lot of balancing because all these, the universal console powers.
Yeah.
Like, my personal favorite, isometric charge. I have that on like every ship I can get it on.
Well,
I love it so much.
Another thing that was brought up in the Tribble forum is the point defense consoles. Because,
Yeah.
you fly up next to the enemy team of shuttles, push the button, and the entire enemy team explodes.
They actually said that that's being changed. Apparently, there's a certain bonus against a small craft, which is being removed if you happen to be in a small craft yourself.
Yeah, there's a 10x damage multiplier or something like that.
I remember that automated defense battery you got as a pre-order bonus.
I've got one of those. Well, I didn't pre-order. I stumbled across my box from a cheap place, and so I've got one of those little plasma destroys all heavy torpedo things. Really handy.
Yeah, have to give up a attack console for it, but especially at lower levels, it's kind of nice.
I just wish I could have a nice version of the TR-116.
Do you have a not nice version of the TR-116?
I don't have any version of it, but I know the one that's there is like a
Mark
equivalent of a Mark 1 or something like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's one of those game-breaking weapons that basically can shoot through walls.
It's
I
a rifle.
I just want it because I love the episode. That was
It's a rifle that doesn't do energy damage. It's a rifle that does kinetic damage. The secondary fire can shoot through walls, but not the primary fire.
Yeah, but yeah, it's still one of those things that it can be used for griefing because there's basically no defense against it.
Oh, I don't care so much about that. But anyway, why don't we move along to what we've been working on, and we'll ask our guest first.
Well,
what
I did
sort
want to
of
bring up one
projects-
thing.
Sorry, go right ahead.
It's been a while since we've done this, but we did have a bit of news for the Frost report.
All right.
Actually,
Yeah.
I think today Frost chimed in about the freecam, the missing freecam command. And he did confirm that this was not an intentional removal or change, and that it is in fact on the official list of things to get fixed, which is a step up from on the pile.
I wasn't sure I'd ever really heard him refer to that official list of things to get fixed before.
It basically made it
I've
sound
heard-
like it had been queued up to be fixed, but was probably going to not show up too soon because all the programmers are worrying about season 8.5 right now.
And I recall hearing about a list before too. It's just one of those things that you can kind of infer is I'm going to bounce this one up because this one's hitting a heck of a lot more people, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm not too surprised. But glad that's getting fixed though. I don't do any of that type of stuff, but I can definitely see why a lot of people are missing it.
Yeah. Well, of course, we've also got the whiteness problem that's persistent, and that also was
Yeah.
supposed to be on the to be fixed programmer list.
Brandflake said he was delaying the start of the next Foundry challenge until that gets fixed, and the last time he said that was with the long load times bug, and it did get fixed. So I have hope.
Oh, I don't doubt it will
I
get
too
fixed.
have, I too have hope because of that.
But that being said, I mean, it's not necessarily preventing me from building in the Foundry currently.
No.
I mean, it's maybe preventing me from wanting to work on some of my existing maps, but building new maps, I'm able to do it because as long as you build from the ground up.
As long as you think about it, and you know what is going to be happening.
So you can still see
I've been-
outlines of everything, and
I've had to open
shapes.
up an old map, but yeah, it's a tough bug, but it can work.
That's funny. I've actually I found it easier to continue working just because all of my maps are for the most part built. So I mean, at most I'm only making minor tweaks, which is kind of like trying to dig through a pile of straw, anyways.
Well, I actually haven't had too much issue with it because I've gotten so used to layering assets on top of each other that I don't really rely on looking at their outlines all that much.
It's not like the old days with the wireframes
Yeah, I mean,
where you saw through everything.
yeah, it's definitely there's a certain
Although there
abstract
were some
required.
advantages to that, I have to say. I mean, in some cases. I don't know how many of you guys were around for the wireframes.
Before my
I
time,
was
that was when this was
Yeah.
all on Tribble, wasn't it? When the
I-
Foundry was on Tribble.
I think it was on holodeck for a little while with the
Well,
wireframes before they changed that.
Well, was that one of the things that they had in season 3 and got rid of when they did the season 4 update?
It might have been.
Because I kind of vaguely remember that. I mean, because when I went back to doing Foundry editing after the season 4 update. I'd kind of forgotten what the Foundry interface looked like, but absolutely nothing in the Foundry interface felt familiar.
Maybe one of the other long timers can tell me, because I have a terrible memory, so maybe one of the guys with better memory can tell me when exactly that changed. But we're always glad to hear bugs being referred to and possibly progress being made, or at least just an update that says, hey, this is on our radar.
Mm-hmm. I that's why I like Cryptic Frost being around. He tells us these things basically, and that's very welcome.
And that was one of the big things we were really asking for. I mean, it's not everything we were asking for, but it gave us that communication. Even if it's just sorry, we're not getting around to it, it's still something, where before it felt like we were talking to a wall with no ears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because before Cryptic Frost, there was really not a lot of interaction down in the bug forum, if any.
Well, there was that one other person who came around sometimes, who actually was one of the devs, even though she didn't really work on Foundry all that much.
It was Zero, wasn't it?
Yeah, Zeronia.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zeronia.
She was she was an old project head for Foundry, wasn't she? Like the first, when they were first putting it out, something like that.
Oh, she kind of was just spearheading Foundry before she got into the producer role. I mean, back when she was QA.
Right.
So in a way, she kind of was the old Cryptic Frost.
And then of course she learned how to add some of the assets. Like we've been told that if you see a ship added, likely that was her.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's their off time. If they get a chance, they pop in one or two, and that's why we've made our hierarchy lists.
Well, she also taught herself how to put new details into the Foundry for us. She made a point of telling us that.
I will say the only
is she
thing.
the one who added the Latinum trophies?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
The TOS assets.
Yeah, and a lot of the
All
TOS
those
assets.
TOS assets. Yeah.
I will say this. I think the only bad part about that is the fact that we don't know when they get those things in, because we don't have little patch notes for that. It's just all of a sudden we've got this asset which wasn't there a week ago, and so we can't really give them thanks back. And at the same time, we don't know what's there until we find it, and then it's like a little surprise.
I definitely have harped on that a little bit.
If they do put it in the patch notes, they don't give us an itemized list of what they added. They just mention that they added new stuff to the Foundry.
I don't often see that note either. Anyway. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been seeing a lot of things like ships and whatnot.
I have made that point to Brandflakes in no uncertain terms a couple times.
I don't know.
Like, we want to know when things are added so we can say how awesome you did.
I'm still going with the guess that they're trying to build this stuff up, and it's slipping in without them knowing about it. And again, sometimes I wonder if
we've had a couple of that happen.
I mean, yeah, and then I think in a couple of cases it's where they're adding in like new stuff to the game, and by default it gets added into the Foundry and prematurely sometimes.
So I like to believe that there is some mystery dev out there who's like a superhero. He wears a cape that says Foundry Man when he does this, and he like puts stuff in that he can't tell anyone he did because he wasn't supposed to take the time to do it.
A Foundry ninja.
There's a man listening to us grinning as he dresses up plans to make a new cape. You realize that now.
The Foundry ninja.
It is, right? I'd like to believe that there's some mystery superhero dev out there who is like sneaking stuff in, and that's why it doesn't show up in the patch notes. But that's just like, a crazy speculation.
Well, the devs have stated that they are planning to add stuff to the Foundry whenever they get the time to do it. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the weird part about it is that it often is a little haphazard. I mean, a lot of these ships that have been showing up are not completely in. I mean, there's a lot of broken ones
or mislabeled.
So, I mean,
then there's weird stuff like the version of the Galaxy class that's halfway separated.
And then
Yeah, where it's got the
really
like
big one.
distance and it's like floating together. Yeah, I know the one you're talking
Yeah.
about. I remember that one.
You know, like the Avenger is currently named Destiny class science vessel or something like that.
I don't know. It could be that this is something they put like new devs on, and new devs make mistakes.
I seem to recall something though that we got that we weren't supposed. The Aquarius, that was it. The destroyer part that pops out of the Odyssey. We got that in the Foundry before it had popped up anywhere. It was like one of those like slip ends.
Well,
some reason it
the
showed
time
up.
ships, the Wells time ship,
That
up in the
was-
Foundry before they actually showed up in the rest of the game.
And so there's got to be some other weird mechanic bouncing around back there, which is bad. But hey, if
where
occasionally
things
we
go
get a
live,
ship,
you're
I'm
not supposed
cool
to
with
go
that.
I think that really kind of highlights the main thing, though, is that there's still so much about the process that we really don't understand. I mean, we're kind of on the outside trying to make observations based on what we see,
Yeah.
but we can't see everything, and so we kind of have these flawed models that we.
We're trying to guess, and Sherlock Holmes would be appalled that we were guessing.
I'm sure the devs listening are laughing or crying, one of the two.
I'm sure none of them are listening right now at this moment, but I know that some of them do listen to our show.
They do listen though. That's the key.
Yeah.
Oh, they can listen without actually getting into the chat.
Oh no.
Well, it's more
Why did
along
you
the lines
reveal
of
that?
they're using. You realize this is why I really like these shows, and I've liked every Foundry thing. They use you guys as a pulse. I mean, they watch you, they listen. I mean, it kind of bites that a lot of the stuff that we've been beta testing, we've been asking for, they've been listening to and applying to the right business model, which is for Neverwinter, for their new stuff, which has a lot more players in it than STO does currently, and it's benefiting. They watch us, they listen, they try to adapt. I honestly have a theory with the redos being done to all the beginning missions. If you look at them, if you look at the style of the missions as the game's kind of progressed, they've watched us as Foundry authors. They've watched what we've done, the optional dialogue choices, the optional paths, these things that we either try to trick to include. They've been adding those into the actual gameplay because we're kind of the pulse, the people who get the real popular missions or those missions which stick out like cause and effect. These influence the devs directly. And so it's stuff like this. This is an inner dialogue with a select small group of people, but it's still, I think, extremely important for not just the development of Foundry, but I think the whole game.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
don't know.
that's
To put
one
it
of
simply.
those that I'm like, you just articulated a point that is in the. Yeah, I agree.
It's like, how do you follow that other than with, can I get an amen, brothers?
No, 'cause, amen doesn't work, but yeah.
So the other thing that I forgot to write down, but I should mention, is that we did have Brandflakes do his Foundry live stream on Friday. Were any of you guys watching that?
Yeah.
I missed it. Sadly.
I watched it.
I was
I want to say that mission is just really cool. How he and I haven't played it, but just watching Brandon play it was really cool because this guy did all kinds of things with optional gameplay and stealth gameplay. And this is let's see, Forget Me Not by Sovereign 77X.
nice.
So I highly recommend everybody go play that, and because I mean people in the chat room who had names that I didn't recognize were going, wow, so this is Foundry missions?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great example.
Most of
I mean,
them
Yeah.
don't know anything else. They either see the list or they stumble across one or two missions, which is like, man, this is boring. Because I mean, there are some really good ones, but for every good one, there's 50 bad ones. I mean, we all
We
work
know
to try
that,
to make
yeah.
it better, and all it takes is one bad egg, and all of a sudden everybody thinks every Foundry mission that isn't a grinder is just bad fanfic.
Yeah.
kind of the nature of
Exactly.
fanfic, actually. I'm sure there's lots of good
So,
examples of fanfic, and then
I-
plenty of
That
mediocre
are
and
done
or bad.
well, yeah.
I tried to throw into the chat room and said, there's hundreds and thousands of missions that are great, just like this one. Go play. But
Well-
how fast the chat moves in those live streams.
Yeah.
Who knows who saw it?
Yeah.
But honestly, one other person, every other person we get that tells somebody else, in their fleet, that's benefit. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
progress.
I mean, do you ever
I agree.
wonder
And Brandon
about?
is getting huge interest in these live streams. I mean,
Yep.
upwards of 500-600 people every time.
You ever wonder about how many people were introduced to the Foundry via this live stream?
I hope a lot.
All I can say is progress.
Yeah.
Relentime in the chat room is saying that his missions are bad fanfic. I'll say, okay, Realm, own up to it. Yeah.
So bad they're
You
good?
can
Be
own
self-aware,
that, Ellum. Good.
Right?
There's an
Which
idea.
is
Write a,
completely wrong, by the way. His missions are pretty good.
that'd be a funny idea is to write a
I enjoy
Foundry
Relum
mission that is
missions.
so bad it's good.
I once wanted to make a mission that was, remember the old exploration missions we all had to do to get those marks to get the Vulcan ship or whatnot way back when?
I didn't realize
Anyway.
how much ship you could get out of it.
You now get a bunch of dilithium, but nobody does the missions anyway. But it was off the Borg sector, and they were randomly generated exploration missions, and the random generation would always hiccup. I once wanted to do a mission that explained, made so much fun of those, where it'd be a Borg, talking about their third dynasty or whatnot, just because of all the words. It was like a bad Mad Libs game, and I wanted to poke fun of it, have the player get like injected with a hallucinogen, and he doesn't realize it until the end, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I'm the thing that's losing my mind here because that plant I was supposed to scan, hit me with some magical science cloud.
Are you sure you're not talking about the Delta Flyer crafting missions?
Well, they became the Delta Flyer crafter missions.
There was one. There was a project back early in the C store, way before its free-to-play conversion. There was a way to earn a couple of C store ships, that was in game.
If I recall, it was the Nebula and it was the Vulcan science ship. They were the only two, and you could earn marks to get them, and you could do them from the exploration. It was the Admiral one right off of the Borg section.
Yeah, it was incredibly grindy. I think only a few people actually.
It was
took the time
horrific.
to-
Oh God, it was bad.
But yeah, I think the Excelsior was one too.
Should mention at this point, they just put up some new patch notes for Tribble. The ship switching, the fast ship swap is what they're calling it, is now live there for people to check out, and the loadouts along with it, which is changing your build.
Time
So
to
we'll
find out how glitchy it is.
Looks like there's a lot of known issues with it. It's obviously not in a polished version at this moment.
Well, that would be what the programmers are all busy with.
Yeah,
And that's what Tribble's for.
this is true. So why don't we move on to what we've been working on? XR, if you want to start us off, what projects have you been working on in the Foundry lately?
Yeah, I'm running on 3 right now, although one's kind of done. I took a long break during that whole section where we couldn't edit for 2 months, or afterwards it was really slow. I just didn't do any Foundry editing over the entire summer, and so I kind of had backlogs. And the one I just was working on was a adaptation of Hunt for Red October, just for like a fun thing for my fleet, to kind of explain away a lot of the brain ships showing up after Q and everything. And it's a spoof of Red October. I've had a lot of fun with it. I still have some edits, so it's not up right now. And then I've got another project, which is another fleet-based. I'm part of an RP fleet, and I like to make missions for my fleet to do, but other members of the public can do. I've got a mission, Distressed Calls, which isn't very, very well played, but I don't advertise it as such. But it's still pretty good, and anyone can play it. And then the other one, which a lot of people will be excited about since it's been over a year and a half since I've made one, is another Amanda Barclay mission, but it's for the KDF, and not to throw too many spoilers around, but basically, you know how there are those duty officer missions where you're trying to weaponize some type of terrible disease? Well, somebody got it in their bright idea that they were going to try to weaponize Barclay protomorphosis syndrome. And I'm using that to experiment with the illusion of optional choice and different pathing, so that way you can either play it as just being real hardline, I'm going to make this weapon, or you can be an honorable individual and have completely, like, everyone always talks about the different endings, and we've seen it with some real good missions. I can't think of them right now, but this is my attempt at that, to give like a really, where you play the mission and you can really have 3 different ways to play it and pulling off that illusion. So that's the big project which I'm working on now.
Awesome.
Cool. I really enjoyed the last
Excellent.
Abandoned Barclay mission I played, so I'm looking forward to this.
I've loved them both. They're some
I
of
just
my
want to do
favorite
it for
missions
the
in Foundry.
Klingon faction. You know, I love the Federation faction, but you know, give a little bit of Klingon love, and I think the concept of Amanda Barclay being kidnapped by a bunch of Klingons is writes itself. She writes herself as a character. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, Dragoon, you mentioned a little bit about what you were doing already, sort of small tweaks rather than big map building. But you want to elaborate? What have you been working on?
Actually, I mean, I haven't had a time to work too much on part 2. I've been mostly trying to fix things from last week, get things ready, just kind of for the podcast.
Should mention for the chat room, if at any time people are too quiet, let us know, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully we got that fixed from last week. That said, on a small update, Make Diplomacy Go left review status and started picking up a little steam. So it's got now got a few plays under its belt.
How are we doing?
I really want to write another mission for that character, the ambassador.
Yeah.
I haven't checked today, but I can check right now.
We're sitting in here. I'll go ahead and do that.
Relon Time says, fail, you must complete part 2 before season 8.5 hits.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's not going to happen.
Yeah, like a week and a half? Not even that, a week.
You know, that is one of the things Foundry authors deal with, that everyone is all like, oh man, a new season release date, and we're like, oh crap, I've got to finish that project like now.
A new season release date.
Hey, look, we got a 1-star. Somebody got one-shotted.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yay, we have 2 1-stars. But
hey,
overall,
you've made it when you start getting 1-stars, right?
Yeah, exactly. I
That's
got one today or yesterday. It was awesome.
I got a 1-star on part 1 not too long ago, and I don't mind people not liking my mission. I mean, but it was kind of weird because he kept complaining about things that weren't in my mission, like school and stuff like that.
Did that one bug where if you clicked on another mission from the Foundry list and had the review window up, you would actually write the review for that mission rather than the one you just played? Has that one been fixed yet?
I think it might be still around, because occasionally you do see it pop up where it looks like it's a review for the wrong mission.
It's a good thing to get into the bug forums, because I don't think I've seen that one documented yet.
See, that's, I think, the real problem with the bug. Like, that's the one we have to really worry about, is the fact that so many of us are so used to all these little things that we don't even think about them anymore. We don't realize we've picked up these traits, or we just ignore it. Yeah. That's the real problem with the bug squashing I think we've got to deal with now.
Yeah, it's like we've dealt with them for so long. Like the thing you just mentioned, I just do it, like, instinctively. It feels like part of the game now. You know, I make sure that I'm on the correct mission, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when I'm reviewing stuff.
Actually, I just realized that I every time I do a mission review, I look at the window and carefully read the name of the mission that I'm writing a review for.
I do it instinctively. I don't even think about it, and that's.
See, I don't, and I probably should.
See, I do it instinctively, and that is what you just said, XR, is absolutely true. That's a huge issue with bug squashing, is I don't even think of it as a bug anymore. It's just the way it is.
You know, the worst part is I've tried. I can't think of anything to, like, make it easy to come across them other than getting a really wide community initiative. And let's face it, the Foundry community initiatives can be entertaining to watch more than effective.
Well, yeah. So you have like 8 different people who want to do 8 different things.
Yeah.
But then again, it gives us
sounds like
great
real
missions.
life.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we do have a mastery Foundry bug list, and I'm a little behind in getting things updated on that, but for the most part, it kind of covers most of the bugs that we know about, and if you don't see it in there, it's probably a good sign to report it.
Yeah, that's true.
Hmm. Mark, have you been working at all in the Foundry?
I've been tinkering with a few things, but I haven't done any real major work recently.
I say he has been building us a little set, which you actually will not see tonight because we're in a map that Hippie will explain a bit later,
Yeah.
and we'll show off to you a bit later.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why we haven't moved around yet much.
Yeah. Speaking of Hippie, why don't you tell us what you've been working on?
So I started off the week, and I'm gonna make a wide, like admission here is I've been working on like up until this week, I've been working on like a costume here and there, or like tweaking bits of dialogue in this mission that I really like. I'm inspired around that deals with the past, but something with the Miranda Mayhem mission. There's a reason I decided I'd bring Miranda Mayhem into the map tonight, right? Is that we're 9 months or more, maybe 10 months at this point, and in total, between the two missions, I've had like 100 maybe plays, 100 and maybe at this point, and it was a little disheartening. So work on what had been really like just steamrolling forward had just ground to a halt. I hadn't done anything on the third episode of the Mayhem series of the ideas that I had. And the other day, like 2 days ago, episode 1 got 7 plays literally in an afternoon. They didn't have them in the morning when I checked before I left for my day, and when I got back in the afternoon, I had over 1,000 something dilithium sitting in my tip jar, and I was like, where did this come from? And so I checked out my missions, and like I said, number 1 had gotten 7 plays, and number 2 had gotten 9 plays or something like that. And they were all like 5 stars and a lot of good comments. But one comment just really like reached out and said, start writing more Miranda Mayhem stuff. And that was, I'm going to say thank you to this guy Lionheart. I have no idea who he is. I have no idea how old his daughter is, or her daughter. I don't know.
Wait,
Lionheart is
Lionheart?
the name. Yeah, is the name.
I remember that name. I don't
So
know.
the comment left with the 5-star rating was, my daughter and I really enjoyed your missions. We even sat and did some of the voices. We can't wait for number 3. And so I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how old her daughter is, but in my mind, some little girl, Miranda Mayhem, has served her purpose. I wanted her to be like Jem in the Holograms. I wanted her to be like Josie and the Pussycats. I wanted her to be like I wanted her to be a strong female protagonist that doesn't depend on being female to win or whatever. No, it's just, this is who they are. They're an intergalactic rock band. It's totally silly to team up Starfleet with this person, but all of a sudden, to my mind, because of that review, it has served its purpose, and Miranda Mayhem is at least some little girl's hero. I don't know if that little girl is 5 or 15 or 23 or whatever. I don't know, but to my mind, that has gotten me working on Miranda Mayhem the Mayhem episode 3, Bounty Hunters, and I spent probably 8 hours on a Borg cube, a space map, a lower level of Alhena Station, another space map, and a final space map the other night, just creating, unable to stop. And I was up till like 3 or 4 in the morning. And since then, every time that I've logged into the game for any amount of time, I'm working on that project again. So that's what I've been doing. Is that.
I'm glad you got your zeal back. Like, I don't want to take us too much on the sideline, but I totally know where you're coming from. I mean, the last, and at no point here am I complaining. Keep that in mind. The last mission I published was the Klingon mission that was for that contest for the Gates of Sto-Vo-Kor. Time will tell, and it has been for a full year the highest rated non-spotlight single mission Klingon mission for a full year running. For a full year, it has not moved past 5 on that top line. And yet, in that whole time, I checked yesterday, it has only 680 plays.
Yeah,
I mean,
in a whole year.
Yeah, granted, the spotlight missions are getting a lot of stuff, and that's awesome, which means the spotlights are doing their purpose. But I mean, that is really disheartening. I mean, here I'm sitting at the best position a non-spotlight author can be. I'm at the top of the list, and over a year's time, there's only this amount where something else, Fed side, can get a bunch of missions real quick, or just any. I honestly can't imagine. I realize I'm spoiled rotten because I can't imagine what it'd be like to be one of my friends whose maximum amount of plays on one of his missions is like 300, and it's tragic because the missions are really good, and
I know
so
I know people who haven't broken 100 plays, and
so I totally
can't imagine being that disheartened.
Well, all of my missions put together have something like 150 plays total.
Wow. I'm just gonna have to go ahead and add all your missions to my list because I'll just do them all after this or whenever. Because I mean that's something, that is one thing. I mentioned Foundry initiatives before. That's something I want to do because I'm the worst villain of this. Is that, for all we talk about people playing missions or getting missions out there, how many of us, save a few, actually, go out and just play a bunch of Foundry missions? And I know I don't. The last few I played were friends missions, things that it was like, hey, could you play this for me? I'm like, sure. I never really went out and searched. And you guys are doing it a lot with your reviews, but I mean it's one of those things. I just need to get out and play more of these missions. I mean, sure, I'm going to come across a few stinkers, but I'm also going to come across those gems.
It does resonate with me though that often when I'm playing Foundry missions or looking for missions to play these days, I'm looking for missions to review as much as I'm looking for spending time just enjoying the missions that I'm playing in the Foundry as well. So
but yeah, don't get disheartened. Anybody, don't get disheartened. Everybody gets disheartened.
Yeah,
but
everybody does.
But really, you sort of have to define what is, the sort of goal for how many plays you're going to realistically get.
Right.
And, I look at my missions and, setting aside the spotlights, which is, a whole other thing, my missions don't tend to get an inordinate amount of plays. I've got, my newest one is at, 60 or something like that. And, the one that I've had on there for the longest time is at maybe 200. And that's been up for like 3 years.
Yeah.
So, I'm not someone who gets an inordinate amount of plays other than those spotlights. So, and I think I look at 60 on that one and I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. I like 60.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe others would look at that and say, that's terrible. 60 plays. Only 60 plays.
Yeah, but I
don't know.
It's one of those things that you can't make Foundry missions for the plays. I mean, it's just a losing proposition out of the gate if that's your goal. You have to make a Foundry mission for yourself, first and foremost.
You do. I completely agree with you. As an author, that is 100% true. But almost devil's advocate, because I agree with you almost 100%. And so, almost devil's advocate, though, there is the argument of when you create art that no one notices, have you really created art? It's not, it's how
I
is
mean,
I
for me, it's sort
how
of a.
I get
how
what
is
you're
Kurt
saying.
Fat,
It isn't.
yeah, it's
For
how
me,
has
it's sort
Kurt
of like a
Fat put it?
two-tier process.
Yeah,
Of,
exactly.
I
Kurt
like it
Fat is
first, and then, I am putting it out there for other people to play. I want other people to play it.
I
That's
want
why I
feedback,
made it. That's
good,
part of why I
bad.
made it, but not the whole of why I made it.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, part of it is that, um, like Van Gogh could have put all of his paintings like in his back kitchen, and no one would have ever noticed. Um, just submitting it, and even maybe posting to the forums isn't enough. I mean, you've really got to fight, and I mean fight, to get your mission noticed, because there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of missions.
Even if you just get it to like your fleet mates, if you play the game with a fleet and just be like, hey, dude, you want to play this? Or, hopefully you're in a fleet which the people will enjoy it. I know a few people which that didn't work out for, and that's terribly disheartening. But yeah, just
But
get it
I
out.
I think you're also absolutely right, XR, and something I've said to people before is, to other Foundry authors is, everybody says, it's hard to get plays, it's hard to get plays, and I said, well, how many Foundry missions have you played lately? And be part of the solution.
Yeah.
And go give people plays. So I think, and I know I should do that more, because I find myself playing missions only to do the review for the podcast, and I had to play more, even if I don't review, just to play them.
I feel like I should be logging on to Star Trek Online to spend my time that I have logged on just playing Foundry missions. And I don't do that.
Well, we're like everybody. I mean,
You
there
got
are other
another
aspects
project.
of the game
I
we
mean,
want to.
But not
if it's not a
not
Foundry
every
thing,
session, but
if it's not a Foundry thing, you're either grinding PV. I know, like my fleet isn't too terribly big, but I really wanted that the destroyer that pops out of the back of the Odyssey, because the Odyssey is like my favorite starship ever, and so I wanted that little destroyer escort. But you need to have like the tier 4 starship bay
Right.
So I basically ground half of that alone. So I would only be logging on for like the bonus marks time, and that was the only thing I was doing. And I'm like, I'll play Foundry missions later. I'll get to working on Foundry missions later, and I didn't have the time. So
all of a
it doesn't
sudden
necessarily just need to be projects. It's sometimes the game gets in the way, which is kind of a
It
good
does.
thing. I don't know.
You're talking to a guy who spent the last, what was it, like month and a half essentially only doing
Don't
the
say
winter
it.
event for marks, because it was the ultimate solution to how to gear up 13 players or 13 characters.
Jogan's not the only one.
I got 59,000 marks.
Whoa.
It was actually
Dirty
59,600.
Last year I
It had
fought
the
those
added- it
snowball
had the
fights
added
for the
bonus of
jackets,
being
but
fun.
geez, that's impressive.
It had the added bonus of being fun. I really liked doing the race. It was a lot of fun.
I give you that.
Yeah.
That is a fun race.
I mean,
But
my one character who was below level 50, she got to level 50 last weekend, and she already had 4,000 marks, Omega marks. It was awesome. But obviously, I didn't play Foundry missions during that time.
I have one main tip about fighting snowmen: get armor that has reg HP mods. I prefer the Jim Hadar armor because it has reg HP times 3.
okay then, I had not thought of that actually.
Good advice.
It is really good. That's good. That's good game advice. I had not even considered that. That's awesome.
Well, to move it along, the only thing that I worked on was we actually got the opportunity to work on our purity missions again. They were taken down from Spotlight, and so we could do some fixes. There really isn't too much in Purity 6 that needed work, but just based on the feedback we had gotten. So I just made a few fixes in that, and that's the only time I've spent in the Foundry over the past week. So, mission reviews. Hippie, why don't you start us off so Greendragoon can show off this awesome map?
Okay, yeah. That way we get to move around a little bit here too. So this week, following Drogon's example, I went into the search and looked for story missions and only story missions, and I avoided all of the really, obvious top things that showed up on the search. Things like uh, I'm going to go over by the turbo lift Green Dragoon. The first things that show up on the search were obviously there were various spotlight missions and such, and a little bit lower down I found one that had less than 100 plays. This had 62 plays when I came in and looked at it. It was called High Rise, and it's by an author whose name is underscore psi underscore, and it's advertised in the mission description as this is strictly a role play area. It's designed to be like a penthouse or an apartment, possibly in a futuristic city. And so you wander into this map out of this turbo lift, and I was just really impressed by this and wanted to let people have a look at it, because this author, or this designer, I want to call him more than an author, because there's no story here. The only objective is walk back out the turbo lift. But he took the time to really, really just design an apartment for people to hang out in. And he included some of the rarely used things like the pool table. He a nice use of things, the various plants that we have, and just accenting the room nicely, and made it kind of a cool apartment-y looking place. But when I came out here, I just kind of stood in awe for a few minutes at what he had designed. The area out here is the cityscape that you can. All it is just what you can see out the windows. There's nothing out there that's interactable. You can't get to it, but you're way up in the air up here. And even if you go to the edge and you look down, he's taken the time to make sure that you see a building and not just the platform that the room you're standing in is on. So he's taken the time to build a freaking city out there that looks really, really nice, in my opinion, especially when it's nothing. Like, he took the time to do that when it's nothing but the background picture for everything. Now, the one thing that made me go is that he used a shuttle out there that never moves, it's by the buildings, kind of straight out. There's a shuttle that never moves at all, and
But it adds ambiance.
it does, exactly. It adds ambiance. This is one of those maps that made me say, okay, so what's behind this door? It's a bedroom and an office, and it overlooks the ocean, so that whoever lives here has a really great room to hang out in. And as I said, it's advertised as a map strictly for role-playing purposes, the whole thing. I've only ever seen one other author take the time to make something that looks like a bathroom area with what is a sonic shower that our good friend XR here is doing jumping jacks in. It's just a lot of detail, a lot of work went into this. It really looks like a penthouse apartment with an attached, bedroom office that overlooks an ocean. This is some really, really nice work, in my opinion. And
I especially like the wall lighting. That's a
he
really
did
difficult to put in touch.
That he used a lot of really cool map tricks, things like embedding pieces into the wall and sinking them down to create cool effects all over the map. I would highly recommend, for someone who just wants to spend a little bit of time chilling out in game and role playing with other people, and there's table. You could Too bad we can't play pool. I will say that one of my greatest wishes now is that this pool table become interactable and we could play pool. Of course, I still want poker as well. So
Yes, poker.
I gave this
I'm
guy
got-
5 stars. I gave this guy 5 stars for design alone, if for nothing else than for the time and the excellent, I think, design work that went into being able to look out those windows and see a really nice city in all directions, and then from the other room have a nice view of the ocean. I think this is really well done.
Do you
So
want to know my favorite part about this entire map design, which I don't think many people would realize, but I finally figured out what it is?
sure, what is it?
It's the space. I mean, we complain about the bridges being too big, but this is an MMO. There's a certain distance which really works for the camera, for the people, and he captured it. And I am impressed. This guy knew what he was doing. So remember, folks, bring a party of 5. Have fun.
It's lower than your normal stow ceiling, but not too low.
But it's got way more than enough room. Yeah.
Objects aren't
It's
cluttered,
actually higher
fly
than most
together.
real ceilings would be, though.
It looks like, your typical expensive apartment high ceiling.
It feels to me like the person who did this has a really, really good sense of just overall design and how rooms are put together to allow for comfortable flow of movement for the people that are in those rooms. And this is really well done. So again, 5 stars. Yeah, I wish I lived in this apartment. This place would be great. So 5 stars.
I don't know if any of us could
found
afford
a pile
this
of flat, and
apartment.
I'm back behind this desk here. I'll just be back here.
Nice. But yeah, from me, 5 stars for this, and I gave him a maximum dilithium tip because, yeah, great map. That's what I wanted to review this week. Was I ran into this while I was looking for story missions, and just looking out this window that I'm standing at, where in behind the couch that Drogon is asleep on, is what caught me and made me say this is so well done. It's the buildings, the trees between the buildings, the perfect or near perfect measuring of how all of the windows are placed in every spot of the house. Yeah, that's it. That's my review for the week. Is I found an RP map that kicks a whole lot of bleep.
Yeah, I have to agree that the way the things are laid out is actually what I could visualize someone doing for a real house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely one of my very favorite maps that I've ever run into.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's see. Mark, you had a review for us tonight.
Yes. It is a mission called Extraction by Naked Snake. That's spelled NAK 3DSNAKE. It's actually a very simple mission. What it is a Federation ship has been captured in the Eta Eridani block near Karat, and Starfleet Command sends you to rescue them. Very simple premise, and quite well done, actually. So, I mean, you track the Klingons to where they are. You take out a few Klingons, beam down to the ship, kill a few more Klingons, disable the device that the Klingons are constructed on board the ship. You don't find out what the device is until later, which is actually one of the cooler parts of the mission, because after you kill off a few more groups of Klingons, you find out that the device that the Klingons been constructing on the ship was apparently some sort of prototype for automated ship controls, but automated ship controls that would work on someone else's ship and not your own ship.
Ew. That was
So what you find out is that the Klingons captured this ship so that they could experiment with using this device to take over the command functions of a Federation starship. Needless to say, it then becomes your task to kill all of the Klingons that know about the project and to destroy all of their research notes, and of course the prototype. It's a very combat-intensive mission, and it doesn't have a heavy story, but the story that it has is very well written and enjoyable. So, you know, it's also not that long. I mean, granted, I kind of, you know, did the whole walk up to a Dehar master and smash him in the face and then kick him after he dies sort of thing. So depending on how good you are at heavy combat, it might take you a lot longer than it did me.
Oh, how heavy are we talking with the combat? Like standard cryptic mission or a little above? Are we talking like original
a little
STF?
above. I mean, because the first map you go into, all it is you taking on a single group of 3 frigates. I mean, you know, simple, easy, boring. Then you beam down, kill a few groups of low-ranking Klingons, which, again, not that hard. Then, for the final ground map, you have to take out a Dehar master, who he renamed to have the name of the Klingon who's the main bad guy. That particular scene actually had one of the cooler things that he did. He wrote into the stories that the Klingons, while they were on the ship, they set up holographic defenses so that the entire time that you were walking around the ship fighting what you thought were Klingons, you were actually fighting holograms of Klingons that the Klingons had created to slow you down. And when you think you killed the Klingon admiral, it turns out that you actually killed a hologram of him. Then when you beam up to the ship for the final confrontation, an entire Klingon fleet warps in, and along with a Federation fleet, and then you end up in this big slugfest where it's you and however many NPC Federation ships against a bunch of Klingon ships. I didn't bother counting. Some of them were actually, you know, battleship groups, though, I think.
Was it a case of, you know, kill 5 objectives or kill 3? Because that's like, when I think of combat intensive, I think of a lot of those missions where it's like, and now kill, you know, 5 out of 5 battleship groups or something. I'm like, oh, joy.
I don't remember numbers, because the way that he structured them, it wasn't one of those things where you like kill 1, okay, now how many more do I have to hunt down and kill? It was kill this guy, walk down the hallway some more, kill that guy. Okay, we're to the objective now.
Okay, all right, yeah, I like that kind of. That sounds pretty good.
And for the final battle, all of the groups spawn pretty close to each other, not on top of you, but, you know, very close to you. So it's not like you have to fly halfway across the map to find them. They're, you know, right there where you can see them when they warp in. So, you know, it was a pretty fun, quick mission that, you know, I liked a lot.
I was looking around the forums a second ago and came across his post in the mission forums, and he said this was his first official mission. He had made a couple more and was waiting entirely. So,
Well, sounds like he's got the right formula down, and that's pretty much the hardest thing to get as a new author, finding out the formula for all the missions, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've got a review tonight. I was asking around looking for submissions to review, and Casmodian piped up with a couple of candidates. And I played one, and frankly, it wasn't very good. And so I'm afraid I'm going to have to fire Casmodian as my secretary.
Mistake of hiring him in the first place.
Yes, it was. Terrible, terrible mistake. So, in talking about this on the chat room, an author called Hauriant pipes up, and Hauriant has been a member of the Starbase UGC chat room for as long as I can remember, and of course is a Foundry author, and he has a new mission called Treasure of the Pirate Picard, which is a completely awesome name. You'll like this one, XR. It's about the mirror universe.
Yay! I mean,
it's actually set entirely in the mirror universe, and you take on the role of your counterpart.
Oh, I like that.
Mm-hmm. Which he tells you about up front. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll totally get into this, because I love mirror universe stuff. I've made a mirror universe mission after, of course, being inspired by yours. So he really had a blast here with the alternate history. He wrote essentially an alternate history of like every TNG character. It varies quite a lot from any of the alternate histories we've heard before. So he's essentially, creating his own history of the mirror universe here, which is cool. Picard was a pirate, and he, instead of the Stargazer, he commanded the Star Tracker or something like that. Star Stalker, one of those, something like that. He let me know that he was going to name it the Star Killer, but thought that maybe he'd run into some EULA violations since that was the original name for Luke Skywalker.
Logical.
I don't think anyone would throw a fit personally, but since that name never was used. One of my favorite bits is, the impetus for the mission is that you're going to find Picard's lost ship. He stole a phase cloaking device being developed by the smuggler Eric Pressman, who had kidnapped a bunch of scientists to work on it. So he had stolen this, and then his ship was lost. And it was like the Pegasus, who was drifting under phase cloak for years and years and years, and finally somebody's found it. So you have to go find it and try and get this phase cloaking device, which obviously is still, a big deal. So it was a really fun mission, and it was very, very dialogue intensive, but to his credit, a lot of it was optional. I kind of figure I'm an average player. If there's some optional dialogue there, I will skip a portion of it and read a portion of it, essentially. And it was very good dialogue. It flowed really well. There were a couple of typos, which I let him know about. It's kind of nice having somebody, in a chat room with you as you're playing a mission. There were a few, I always say this because, hindsight is 2020, but I think there were a few map transitions that could have been avoided. There's an opening space map, for example. You go to a star system and you go to a space map which had really not much on it, and you could have beamed right to the other person's ship. But I think in this case he might have been going for sort of bookends. In which case, if that was sort of an intentional thing.
Like the establishing shot, we always saw the starship orbiting the planet,
Mhm.
that type of...
Kind of like that, yeah. And so, if it's an intentional thing, I'd say go for it. But if it's something to look at is always, where can I eliminate a map transition? And one thing I want to talk about here a little bit, which I think I've mentioned before, is that there was some texture flickering, some texture overlap on some of these space backdrops. When you do a custom backdrop and you combine several different ones, there are some of them that don't play nice with each other's, and I would love to have the time to go through and test every single one of them with every single other one to figure out which ones actually do it. But that would take a long, long time, months.
Oh, you mean the space backdrops?
Yeah, space backdrops.
The number one offender is the briar patch.
Yeah.
It will obscure anything that pops up behind it. Anything.
I want to say this one was, it was like a big orange cloud. a localized orange cloud, and whatever backdrop it was in front of, it was flashing in and out. And so
I was going to say sometimes it's not just obscuring; it's actually
it's a
they're
texture.
flipping back and forth.
It's like what happens on your your detail objects where you have them if you have them at the same coordinates. So, I mean, because no one has gone through and looked at which ones mess with each other like that, there's no way to sort of predict it. So you just kind of have to be on the lookout for it when you're testing your maps. But this was a really fun mission. He did some tech things where you essentially had some alternate story paths. I mean, you go through the same map regardless, but there were some alternate story paths. There were a couple characters that you could align yourself with, including one that was the Voyager EMH, who thankfully looked nothing like Bob Picardo, so no EULA violation there. Who had some great lines about the Mirror Janeway, who was apparently the first Maj of the entire Kazon collective or whatever it was in the Mirror universe, having apparently conquered it.
I like that.
There's little lines like that all throughout of the characters, and of course the whole time you're in a plot by Lord William Riker. And you're plotting against you're at some points plotting against him, at some points you're a victim of his plots, without him ever being on screen, which is I love having that sometimes, the sort of the behind the scenes manipulative villain. I think in that regard it definitely calls for a sequel.
Is it standalone? Like you actually finish it in one mission?
Yeah, you do.
Oh, sweet.
But I think there's that sequel hook. Which I don't mind when that's there for sure, and it may not have been intentional even. I do like a mission. If it's a standalone mission, it should stand alone, but it's okay if there's a sequel hook in it, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm cool with that. I just don't. When a mission isn't marked for it, being one of how many, and you get in and you're waiting for that payoff of the climax, and all of a sudden it's like, lol, your villain is another castle. It's like, oh god, not another one, and you just. That's one of my little tweaks and peeves.
People who do that are horrible.
I hate to say it, but I've done that.
Well, that's
I have done nothing but that.
Well, no, you have another mission now, Mr. Greendragoon.
That's true. There's no
part one is not your only mission anymore. So everybody give Treasure of the Pirate Picard a try.
All right.
I will. I definitely will.
We will move on.
I'll Hauriant that play, I'm sure.
So let's see. We did not have a tech topic tonight, I think, right?
No.
But we had some good discussion topics, and one that I definitely wanted to talk about with XR377 here, because it was something that he brought up not too long ago in a forum post. And the question is, what do you do when Cryptic changes something? Because they've been changing a lot of their old content lately. What do you do when your mission is based on something that then changes in the game? And if you want to sort of elaborate on what's happened to you.
Well, there's a little extra backstory, personal reflection, which I always giggle when you say it, and it sounds girly, I know, but I always giggle when you say it's your favorite mission and it inspired you. But it's my favorite mission too. What happened was I played Stowe for like a little 14-day account thing, the free out of the box, whatever it was, or free trial. And I did that only because I heard that Foundry was coming out. Because I'd played City of Heroes, I'd quit before Architect, but I loved the concept of it. So I joined Stowe for the Foundry. And I played through the game, I played through the mission, and about the time you reach Captain back in those days was when you started bumping into the Mirror Universe, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to run into myself, aren't I? That's going to be so, I hope they don't kill me, I hope they make it awesome. And sure enough, I finished the DS9 arc, and it never happened, and I'm like, all right, that was missing. So my first goal for my first mission was going to make that mission I wanted to see in Stowe. So I set out to make personal reflection, and I wanted it to be about you. So it had to include aspects, and you can't include the backstory of a character if somebody's really in depth in character beyond the game. All you have is the game. And the only mission out of all of the missions that you could really guarantee they played was the beginning tutorial. I mean, you could say it with Azure too, but so I went back in, I dug through that tutorial, I made copies of all these characters, and I basically built a mission around that idea. I mean, I couldn't have them on their original craft because it was either a Miranda or a Centaur. So I turned the Khitomer into the major setting because every player stepped onto the Khitomer. Every player spoke with, the captain, who originally was Quant Amic, I believe. And so I built this mission. It has that. It's the best mission I've ever made. I will say that to this day. Best mission I've ever made. The perfect balance with dialogue, combat, all that. And cool, yay, sweet, awesome. I was happy. I made the mission I wanted in the game. I moved on to other Foundry stuff. Eventually, they decided they wanted to go back to the tutorial, and this was before this last one. And they went in to spruce up some things, make it move a little faster. That was when they changed the captain's name to Taggart, the Denobulian, and made it so it was as a name gag off of the guy from Galaxy Quest, I think it was. And so that was my first introduction to a case where, all right, I built my story around the fact that here is this captain who died, and in this mission you have to basically fight, and now his name's changed and all these little things. Oh, that was easy enough to go in. I could tweak around. And so that was my first real exposure to, some kind of change. But at the same time in my head, I'm like, this is the tutorial. They've got voiceover work from the guy who plays Spock in the new movies. They're not going to rip this out. I've got a solid thing here. And sure enough, when they did the last update, which is a fine, exciting thing, most of my trouble with it is why Vega's in the wrong spot and why there's literally no reason. I really like Khitomer Accord, the original SDF story, and I was upset with that. But anyway, the mission's good. They really fixed up the trouble spots of the lulls. They gave a good, solid reason other than Quinn just being like, oh, by the way, you can have the ship now. For you being captain, they made you invested, and that's great. Problem is, in doing that, they completely gutted my mission. There's no way my mission, in any regards, can actually exist anymore. You're never over on the Khitomer. You do have the same interactions with the captain, but half of the cast is suddenly gone. All these little gags about force fields, which anybody who'd played that original tutorial would have that little memory. And so my mission was basically, which is my best mission, made others, Amanda Barclay's amazingly popular, but my best mission suddenly wasn't canon anymore and was only really effective for a niche audience. I mean, anybody new who starts the game now, any friends I get to join the game, and they really can't get the same experience out of it. And that was jarring. And that's I'm not sure. I wrote myself into a corner doing it. I know playing the tutorial, I was banking on the fact that they weren't going to edit it or completely remove it like they did and revamp it to such an extent. So I mean, it was a gamble. I thought it was a very safe gamble, but apparently I was wrong. But at the same time, there's really nothing I can do about it. I mean, we've all read the terms of service. I mean, technically, right now, if Cryptic felt so compelled, they could take every one of our missions away, publish it as their comic because they've got whole legal control over the content and can claim it as theirs, and say goodbye. So I mean, we've already waived basically all of our rights. So I mean, I don't have any real reason other than just sentimentality to be upset. But I mean, it was jarring to have your crown jewel suddenly not even be like swept under, but it's like completely redundant. It's like creating the best buggy whip and then the car comes out. You're like, well, dang. And that's basically
so
like the encompassing of my emotions on the situation.
So the question is, what to do then? What to do with it? And there's several different ways you could approach it. Comes to my mind, you could either alter it to sort of fit things in the new tutorial. You could create a prequel mission that puts in all the plot points that you need, or something like that. Or you could not even worry about it. Just leave it.
Going in order, and this was my thought process on doing it. The first and foremost would be just to go back and do it off the new tutorial. But then I've got like two problems with that. One, the people from that first 3 years would be like, "What's this? This isn't the mission I played." Then you've got the fact that I can't use the same props and settings and plot basically because the Borg end has been ripped up and the location is no longer very backwater or on the Romulan front. And there were all these little things, and then there's also the fact I kind of don't like certain aspects of the plot. So I'm like, well, if I don't like it, I'm not going to use it and build a mission around it. So that one kind of went off the window because I didn't want to make a completely new mission, although I still love the concept, especially now that I have the added thing that Cryptic could go through and change it again. I figure the next time I want to challenge something or put something out as strong as, say, the mirror self, something which is really, really important, I would have to have a stronger position to do so. And I don't see that happening. But, who knows? A magic fairy could drop down, give me a job at Cryptic, and they're like, oh, by the way, you can make an entire mirror series episode. And I'd be like, oh my God, 5 episodes. It would be great. But no, dreams. So the second option, what was the second option? You said it was prequel mission. Yes.
Yeah, make a prequel mission.
The major problem with that is kind of the major problem, which isn't really a problem, but I view with missions, series missions, is that you kind of need to guarantee the player will play both. And if they decide for whatever reason not to, or they don't get around to it, or forget, there's that big gap since we can't force players to do missions in series. If we could, that would really free that one up for more of an opportunity. And then there's the other aspect that part of the thing that made this fun was the level of it is level, I think 31 or 40, whatever level you actually get the rank of captain at officially. So you've played more than, half the level base. Then all of a sudden you have to go back to this beginning portion. So I think there were a lot of little subtleties that I really loved about the position, which I would feel is just too lost. So that's why I didn't do that. So I decided, and this was the final thing I did on the third, I just didn't do anything. I put in orange text at the beginning disclaimer at the first thing, and then there's even a safety catch at an early briefing dialogue that, if you didn't read the first 2 times, here it is flat out in your face, which is like, hey, this mission is technically out of date. If you didn't play the tutorial or start the game between, this 3-year period, this isn't going to make sense. It'll still be fun. You'll still do a lot of things, but it won't be the same. And that's what I did. So that way I kept, for those,
sort of made it a
for
time
that niche
capsule.
audience, I kept it intact. I kept it the way I really liked. And who knows, they could revert the story things once they give, because they've talked about giving us an alpha quadrant, and Vega would be an alpha if they move that over, and who knows. So it's not like I'm going to burn everything I've created. And yet at the same time, I'm also scarred enough at this point that I'm not going to rush out to do the exact same thing, because let's face it, good Foundry work takes a lot of time and effort and heart, and I've got other projects to focus on. So
I say that just reminded me of how when they first added episode replay to the game, I had one of my characters attempt to use episode replay to replay the Federation tutorial. You can't do that anymore, but she still had, last time I checked, she still had it stuck in her mission list.
There was a time when you could. But I don't know, have you guys had other instances where a cryptic change has affected your mission? I know I have with my my Descent series, which was all based on things going on in the Romulan Empire, which was made before any of the new Romulus stuff had gone on.
Well,
And before even the Romulan featured episode series, which I changed it to make it set after that. So when I go back and finally get around to revising it, I'm going to have to include some sort of mention of the Romulan Republic, even though most of it takes place in the Empire proper.
So you're going with Route 1, the kind of edit things to make it
Yeah,
go.
a little bit. I don't think I'm going to have to change it a lot because as it stands, it doesn't, it doesn't involve the Republic. But I mean, I could change it where it could. Not sure yet, but I'm definitely going to change it.
I have two missions that I had issues with because Cryptic changed the base maps that I used for the missions, but I can't think of any of my missions where a storyline change made it so the mission no longer made sense.
You do bring up the mechanics part of it, which is something that Time said in the
Yeah, I was
in the
reading
chat
that right now.
when he mentioned Drozana Station, because of course that underwent a big change.
Yeah.
That was the thing. Like, I like the new station, but they kind of rendered their own. They gave themselves their own problem because I mean, that first featured episode, I love the fact that you could switch between the old and the new, and you saw it. Now people are almost completely missing the old, and so it's just a lobby in a bar with Scotty on it. I mean, it's not that same room. They kind of
that was
did the
part
same
of the
thing
fun
to
is that
themselves.
it was the same room as the social zone, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I
200
would love to
years
see them
before.
go back and realign those so that you do have that
Like
same
if they went
connection.
back and fixed the mission, I mean that's they can do that though. They've got the ability to create maps if they've got time.
Yeah.
I had a slight close call in that the Midas array got referenced for the first time ever in one of the dev blogs, one of those lore dev blogs. Now, thankfully, they didn't say anything that negated anything I had done, but still, when I saw it mentioned,
yeah, you read it and your heart's like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap.
yeah. Well, it was kind of stuck between they mentioned something for my mission, and it's like so excited, and then oh crud, they might change something.
Yeah, if I remember right, that dev blog basically just said that the Midas array hasn't gotten blown up yet, and the Federation used it to scan for something.
Yeah, it basically is. They were
Yeah.
using it for the same thing it was used in the shows,
Yeah,
which was
it's not
long-range
like you had
communication.
to find out that suddenly, oh crap, it was destroyed 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
So you guys are talking about the thing that would do that to mine would be if they went back and made new maps for the Drozana of the past, because mine when Drozana changed and they kept the missions where you go to the past, you're still in those old TOS maps that they had built because they're great maps, and I can understand why they wanted to keep them. That if they changed those are the maps that mine use. So
Well, they wouldn't change
well,
the
I mean, they
lower
won't
levels.
change the assets we've got. It's just like the few, like for their own
Yeah.
missions. I mean, we still
Yeah.
have the original Earth space dock. I mean,
Right.
the ugly, weird thing with the like gyroscope arms.
yeah, they have said that they're not going to remove any maps that are currently in the Foundry, because they wouldn't want to invalidate old missions and make them unpublished.
Yeah, and a change to the Drozana missions would only affect the bar. The lower levels have never been.
Yeah.
Altered.
yeah, but the bar is what I use.
Yeah, they
Well,
would
see, your
keep
mission
the old one.
Fine.
Yeah.
We can't use the lower levels of Drozana anyways.
Yeah, we don't have them. I wish we did.
Yeah.
There was that was the other thing I was going to say, because another mission that I know he was probably sweating bullets was Havraha's. I think it was Havraha. He did the prequel towards whatever there's the Romulan or the Vulcan.
Divide et Impera.
Yeah, I can never pronounce the last.
And actually, so is one of our spotlight winners.
Yeah.
So if they ever change that, there's some.
He's
interesting
literally out of the water. He can't do anything. So it's one of those kind of dangerous situations. Or the one, whatever happened to Reuben James, was that the one that won one of those challenges?
Yeah, that's
a while
mine.
back?
That's
And
Yep,
those
that's
were all
mine.
based on like prequels. So if they ever change things after, I mean, suddenly this.
and I just came out with one that was based on the Breen arc.
So there is a threat. I mean, it's not necessarily a terrible bad threat, but I mean,
Yeah, it's overcomable.
It's not just something that happens to one or two people. Everybody, to make a strong mission, you have to make it tied around the captain, the player's captain, who is, for all intents and purposes, a badass. I mean, he found out about Romulus, and if you're Romulan, you basically help discover the home world, the new home world. I mean, your character, each line, even the Klingon one now, has done some pretty awesome things. And so good missions tend to keep that in mind, and sometimes things change, and sometimes it's not as easy as a dialogue shift. So, oh well.
It kind of reminds me. I've got a couple of books from the or Star Trek books that were written like during early TNG, and a few of them I had to kind of put down because what they were describing did not match what eventually developed in the show. So I mean, it's not something that's specific just to the Foundry and Cryptic and Stowe. This happened with the shows too. I mean,
yeah. Well, that's actually something I noticed a lot reading back when I used to actually read the novels, is that the novels, not all of them were all that well researched in the first place. So I noticed that some of them had things that didn't get contradicted later. They got contradicted before the novel was written.
Yeah, I had one where it was kept referring to Will Riker as Bill, which he.
I think I remember that.
I couldn't get more than a chapter.
Nobody has ever called him Bill, as far as I know, other than that.
Yeah. But I mean, there are times when for instance, a book will go expound upon one of the characters' families, which at the time may not have been known, but later on were developed as like, what's the name of Tom Paris's dad? I wasn't mentioned until later, but I bet you there was a couple of books that got it wrong before it was revealed. So I mean,
well, that was even Tom Paris. They had to tweak around because he's basically the same character, but for legal reasons they couldn't use the same name, and so even the father,
Nicholas Locarno from
TNG. Yeah. Because I loved him as a character. I loved, but that's something, and I'll only mention it once and promise we won't get sidetracked. But that's Star Trek and Star Wars are always very compared, and the thing that was primarily different with Star Trek was that. Who wrote Star Trek? Everyone, Gene Roddenberry, sure, yeah. Well, he was an advisor to a certain point. Star Trek has had like thousands of writers, thousands or hundreds, maybe hundreds, but like they're all communicating, they're all contradicting themselves, and so the community is dynamic. George Lucas said, I'm the main law, and he suddenly outrights Boba Fett's backstory, which has a really successful running in comics and all this other stuff, and it drives the fan base mad. So we've at least got this weird benefit from kind of having to watch these, things that, let's face it, wikis were designed for. Star Trek nerds are a very particular type of geekery, which, we're the ones that everyone always in TV shows parroting us are the ones that know every bit of trivia.
Yeah, I mean, anyway, I mean, it doesn't even, I mean, it's not even specific to people who write missions based off of Cryptic missions. Because, I mean, at any time, Cryptic could invoke some piece of lore from the shows that contradicts something that a Foundry mission is based off of. But it's kind of the continuing risk of working with a developing franchise.
Yeah, and I will say
that brings up one of my personal favorite KDF missions. It's called Krios Falling, which I mean, if Cryptic ever goes and addresses the situation with the Kriosians and the KDF, well, I mean, there's a 50-50 chance that mission will no longer make sense.
Yeah, if anyone ever. If Cryptic or anyone else ever shows the Zenkethi, who are not shown on the series, so we don't know what they look like. If Cryptic ever does that creates contradiction with my mission, and I think at least two others that I know of who have tried to make the Zenkethi.
Yeah. So I mean,
that's sort of just what we deal with.
Yeah, it's something we all face on some level, and it's just kind of par for the course, really.
Yep. So let's move on to a new topic. I believe Greendragoon had a good one about writing relatable characters.
Yeah, I mean, I've never felt overly strong about, and so it's something that it's always on one level fascinated me, and another scared me a little. So I just kind of wanted to bring up the idea of trying to write relatable characters. I mean, characters that kind of connect with the player. And of course, it gets hard because not all players are the same. So what works for one person might not work for another. But I mean, how do you guys go about like really trying to make a character relatable or memorable, and in some way just get them to connect with a player somehow?
Well, I'm not sure how. Take everything I say with a grain of salt here, because the character I've created, which I'm most known for, Amanda Barclay, let's face it, she's one Doctor Who reference away from being the worst Mary Sue in the universe. We we've got to. I mean, we're playing around in Star Trek. Star Trek was, where Mary Sue came from, and one of the things though that I think make a strong character, make that relatability, is a certain aspect of failure or quirk. And it was let's look at Amanda Barclay's father. I mean, Reginald Barclay was one of those characters everybody knew for different reasons, whether it was that weird geek person or it was that guy who was just kind of oddball that everyone picked on. Let's face it, a lot of us, I know I looked at him as kind of a warning figure. He had a hologram addiction. I mean, let's face it, he was building his alternate realities, and that was kind of better for him, and here he could live out these fantasies. And that was one of those things that's like, wow, I mean, the guy's he's got this big fault. I mean, right there, he's antisocial, and he's trying to hide away. So, like, a lot of people, I think, latched on to him because he wasn't Wesley Crusher coming up with every answer, or he wasn't, somebody who had this experience with diplomacy with aliens for, 2 decades. He was really flawed. I mean, granted, you can have a character who's a complete screw up and it won't attach, but I think it's those little quirks. I mean, flaws are part of those little quirks, and it doesn't need to be something big. It doesn't need to be something obvious. But I mean, when you're looking at a character, you consider, where they would deal bad. Would they deal bad in a social situation, in a combat scenario? Are they going to hide in a corner because they don't know anything? I mean, it's.
In Barclay's case, though, part of the reason why he came across as a cool character, though, is not so much because of his flaws. It's because, in spite of his flaws, he's a good guy, and he's actually really, really smart. It's just that he has issues communicating with others,
which I think is something that a lot of us have as well.
Right, a lot of
I
people
definitely
relate.
find him a relatable character. I mean, that social awkwardness is something that I've dealt with in my life. So it's like, if character has something that I've dealt with in my life, it's just instant related with, you look at it and you say, oh yeah, that's me.
But beware, you could also accidentally, like in trying to build something to specifically get attached, you could end up making a stereotype, and that's one of those. Like,
I was about to say I don't. Yeah, I don't write a character to try to be relatable. The best I think that we can do is to write a character to be as real within their situation as we possibly can. So that because real people have qualities that make them relatable. So if you try to create a character that is a full character, the ones that have those relatable qualities, the likability, the even though they've got these flaws, that is a big part of it too. Is that real people are not these perfect beings, and that makes that is a big part of making them relatable. I think you're absolutely right
on
about
the flip
that.
side of that is, you want to write them with flaws that people have, but you also want to write them with things that they're good at, and things, you might say positive personality
something
traits.
they went to school for
Yeah.
years, or there's a reason why they're a tactical captain in command of a starship.
Say, this guy might be socially awkward, but he's really smart.
One
And, in a crisis, he
character
will come through for
that
you.
comes to mind from this discussion is one from the one of the books that I read. Is that this woman was actually from some planet that was this isolated colony of humans that didn't, want to be associated with the Federation. They were one of those groups of humans that, decided that they wanted to make their own place in the stars away from the Federation. Well, it turns out, though, that this planet was a colony of augments. They were augments who had rejected Khan's approach to being a superior race and had decided to go find a place to live in peace. Well,
backstory very much helps.
This woman, though, ends up as a member of the crew of the Enterprise because this society has, over time, due to their policy of avoiding contact with the Federation, devolved into a totalitarian dictatorship that a lot of their citizens don't like anymore, and some of them went to a considerable amount of effort to leave. So you have this woman on the Enterprise as this random engineer crewman who is almost as strong as Data and has reflexes fast enough to, literally dodge phaser fire. And her personality flaw is that she's so self-conscious about her abilities that she intentionally acts clumsy and weak so that people won't notice that she's this superhuman being who's almost like a demigod walking around the rest of the mere mortals.
Yeah, that gives that little aspect of control. It also has something else which I don't think any of us have mentioned yet. Was it has this snag, this uniqueness. Like when he said, in truth, they were a colony of augments. Like three of us went, ooh, that immediately got us. That was that little. Sometimes it takes a pinprick of interest. I mean, some can be bigger than others, but that is something else. I mean, if it is just a group of faceless people where being faceless isn't their unique quality, you're not gonna blink your eyes when you come across some guy with dark hair unless suddenly he has a beard. Oh, hey, cool. I'm not a Riker fanboy, I swear.
I took some creative writing classes in college, and one of them had us do character sheets for our characters, which has all of their, you essentially write down all of the background information about this character. And I'm just googling a few, and there's just all kinds of them you can find that you can use. This one is great. It has 370 questions that you can ask yourself about this character. Here's one of my personal favorites: is what is their theme song? 'Cause that'll often tell you a lot. Is either what would they pick as their theme song, or what would you pick as the theme song to describe them? Both of those could tell you a lot.
First thing I did for Miranda Mayhem was pick her theme song.
Which is, you're gonna have to tell me.
Would you like to share it?
Yes, it's Enough Is Never Enough by Garbage.
I know the song.
Good choice.
Yeah.
So wait, is she interesting? Interesting. I mean, it's against my policy of playing uncompleted series missions, but I may need to jump into that.
They're designed to be one-offs. It's like a cartoon series. They're designed to be one-offs. So, with a slight continuing story. So yeah. But the first thing I did was pick a theme song. That's a great question.
But it goes on to say, to ask, what is this character's greatest accomplishments? What are their biggest failures? How much self-confidence do they have? Do they have any, particular afflictions or traumas in their past?
Things that get you thinking of character exercises, like, what would this character do on a crowded public bus?
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily setting relatable, but it still gets you thinking about, all right, is that
right on? Yeah.
And one of the things that I always tell people is that, when I'm writing, I'm essentially writing myself as these characters. I would say, what would I do if I was this character and had these personality traits? What would I say? And so, each character that I write has a little bit of me in it. Not 100%, but definitely a little bit. And
Yeah, you need to be able to
that's what makes
step
it easy
into
for
their
me
shoes.
to relate to my own characters. And hopefully, if I can, other people can.
I mean, I was thinking about it, and something that occurs to me is that in order to really relate to a character, you need to both see them at their weakest and also at their strongest. So, I mean, at the same time, so you kind of sympathize with them when they're at their having their hardest moment, and also kind of rejoice with them when they have their greatest victory.
We've been using Barclay as our example because of course he fits very very well.
Yeah.
But in his opening episode, we saw both of those. We saw his greatest moments and his weakest moments.
Yeah.
Something else I do want to mention, it's more directed towards us as Foundry authors and anybody who's listening who is after making characters for Foundry missions, in that there is somebody who is the most important character, and we can't forget that. I mean,
True.
it's the thing that it's the main reason why I don't like writing a lot of the Barclay missions, and I don't just make thousands of them. And that is the most important character we have to deal with is the main character.
Yeah.
The player character.
The player.
And actually, that brings up the.
So.
I was gonna say that brings up the next point I was gonna make. Is how do we write in the context of Stowe?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that's like, again, I feel bad being the guy talking about this because I'm also the one with Amanda Barclay. I was inspired to make her after Helena. I mean, and now more people know about my character than Helena, and I feel terrible about that. But I feel absolutely. I mean, Helena's got the buff. I'm cool with that. Not that I wouldn't say a little holographic Barclay buff wouldn't be, badass. I mean, that's. But another thing. But even when you have a strong character, you need to be careful that they're not overshadowing the main character. I mean, it's not one of those situations where the other character's being a complete badass and defeating all the bad guys and you're there helping. It's even along the lines that even when they're not, you can't let them overshadow. You need to engage the character. So what's keeping the person involved with a character is their interactions with them, and you always need to keep that in mind. I'd like to think I balance it with dialogue and what the communications actually are, but I mean there's different ways to do it. But I mean, that's when writing characters, you could have the greatest character in the world, and when I mean greatest, I don't mean like physically the best at what they do, but like they're just rounded, complete. Everybody who comes across is like, wow, that's great. But if they overshadow the player captain, then you failed. I mean, not to say you haven't made a good mission, but you've not really done the best you can as a Foundry author if what you're doing is out there to make missions. But that's just something I feel
advice on the player character would be sort of the same as essentially start by writing yourself. What would you say in that situation as far as player dialogue goes, and then kind of branch out and include some options of what would you not say, but somebody else might.
The options where you get in a situation where you don't need to say that the character had a backstory or something, but the player can say something like, "Oh man, that's like the time I was on Riza," and so then you can play around with those little tweaks. And
leave some
dialogue.
of it up to the imagination. It's like saying, "Oh yeah, that one time with the thing." Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Then you develop
There's
you did stuff.
There's an old concept in video gaming known as the silent protagonist, and one of the things I've always noticed with in those situations is that the main character has no character, but the main character's character can be reflected in other characters. And I think dealing with a memorable character, it's one of the key things is to have their emotions reflect be implied reflection of the main character.
Yeah.
Can you
Mhm.
explain that, like in practice, a practical example?
Like a character being overjoyed that you're helping them out and going on about how helpful you are. I mean, or or a character
Tell
trying
me
to
if I'm
empathize with you, that you're going through a
tell
hard.
me if I'm thinking about it the same way that you are here, Dragoon. So when I write the Miranda Mayhem missions, Drogon, I'm expecting that there are some players that are going to be, I don't want to hear all of this sciencey gobbledygook. I don't understand it, nor do I want to, but I want to celebrate my victory because I just, yay, we won things. That's Miranda. They can totally, I can reflect those emotions through Miranda, but that player who wants to know all the sciencey like nonsense, that occurs through another character, the character of Rockin' Roxy the robot, when she speaks and like says things she's talking, or one of the other characters. Like, I try to use those characters to hopefully reflect the variety of, like, hey, we just won that fight, yay, kind of thing, like to try to reflect that in the other characters that are appearing and running along with the main character.
That's really, yeah, that's like how you should do it. I was thinking back on some of the other characters I've made. They're my longest missions. They don't the computer's children's series. It's I built it around the idea of you play one side as the Klingon, one side as the Federation, and both are happening at once. And to do this, I've got two characters. For the Klingons, it's this ambassador, Olmet, and then for the Federation, it's this Federation captain. And I kill them. Spoilers. But I want that death when you have to kill them. If you're playing, the mission is like, if you should play both to really see it. But the other player ends up killing that, and I wanted that to mean something. And so you have to get people attached. And for the one, the Federation captain, he's a great example. Other than just that random quirk of me skewing the dialogue, so I had like an accent of sorts. Like one of those that you really picture somebody who's perhaps a little too down to earth. Like one of those, I don't want to use the word Southern accents, but more like Arkansas. Can't do it right now. But other than that quirk, like he had that aspect, like you're talking about. He was a little more of a diplomacy. That's what my staff's for. I'll just nod, smile my head, and if there's an option where I can run away and shoot something, yoink, I'm doing that. And that's one of those things that is a really handy trait, because that if it's not the individual somebody can relate to specifically, like seeing themselves in them, it is somebody that they can relate to someone they know, that friend or that other person they've run into, that fleet mate. That's another thing. The relatability doesn't need to be towards one person. It can be towards somebody
Everybody.
else.
Let's
relatable.
extend this a little bit, because this is something that Mark was going to bring up. Is let's extend this to villains. We've talked about a lot of characters that are sort of ally characters. So what about villains? How do you create complex and relatable even villains? Because those tend to be the best.
Am
And
I
I
allowed
don't know,
to talk first again?
maybe it's sort of the same advice actually as ally characters.
Well, definitely that advice that we've been talking about goes for everything. But when you
Yeah,
come
I
to
think all that
villains,
applies.
when you come to villains, you've got the other aspect, which is more, I guess, plot based, which is kind of it goes along with the relatability. I remember reading a chart where it listed the hierarchy of villains, and at the bottom were just evil for evil's sake, and then you've got the tier above them who do it for power. But like the top of the tier, the ones that are like, oh man, this villain is the ones where their motives are perhaps better than the protagonists, and that's like Ozymandias from Watchmen, and I was thinking of another good one, but you
Yeah,
can relate. Like some
he's
villains can
definitely
be
he's definitely an interesting example.
like some
Yeah.
villains can be great because you're like the Joker. Oh man, he's crazy, and that's like an aspect about him. But then you've got like Hans Gruber, who if he was an idealist, who with that carbon cup or whatever, but no, he ends up just being a thief. But there's still something entrancing about the fact
and
he is just
even the Joker, depending on who's playing. I mean, if you're looking at like the Heath Ledger Joker, you wonder
versus
if
Jack
is he
Nicholson.
actually crazy? Is he just putting all of this on so you'll think he's crazy because it's part of his plan?
Well,
Does
that's
he
something
Yeah.
have a plan, or is he actually crazy?
that's something
Keeps you
that's
guessing.
buried in the comics a lot. A lot of times in the comics they play it as if the Joker is so crazy that he doesn't even know what he's doing half the time. But some of the other times in the comics, you see that the Joker really is making plans and things. And he uses the whole craziness as a mask to keep people off guard. Sometimes in the comics.
So I'm gonna roll it back to STO for a moment. My actual favorite villain that they've put into the game, that is, the closest to the ha 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 cackling villain, is Hakeem. I liked him a lot through all of the different ways that I met him as a player.
He's certainly a bit
right up.
comic booky, isn't he?
He is a little bit. He's a little bit over the top, but there's an aspect of his character that's really, I think, important to remember. Like everything that we talked about, previously, when we're talking about characters, is 100% true with villain characters as well. But the best villains are the ones who Hakeem never believed that he was a villain.
Mm-hmm.
To Hakeem, the player character was always the villain that was trying to bring down the rightful Romulan empire, which he served to his very last breath. He was a hero to himself. And he was probably a hero to some other members of the Tal Shiar as well. So the best villains never see themselves as a villain, and that's important to remember when you're trying to write someone who is in any way realistic as far as villains go.
I would argue that with the oh no, I forgot the words. Never mind. The tragic villain, somebody who does villainy, and they realize they're doing bad, but they're the ends justify. I mean, those can also be, not saying you're wrong, but saying in addition you can have the tragic villain. I think the real moral is that another aspect of I think that we're all bouncing around is that another aspect of characterization when it comes to villains is their goals, their primary thing.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a major trait you can use. Although I will say this, because it's probably the only chance I'll get to say it to the larger Foundry forum, is that one thing about a villain is that you can't just always have him escape, man. Sometimes you want to be able to get a one-up on him. Otherwise, it's just like, what am I doing this? Or whatnot. I mean, jumping back to Heath Ledger's Joker, not for Joker, but there was that point in that movie where you're like, really? He planned all of this? He has beaten everybody? He's never really lost at all? Ever? Except in the end? At one time?
Oh,
What?
I totally noticed.
Or like you come across that. I mean, sometimes it can be much
but
less
see, for me,
I
I
think
think
an
like
escape pod, but
even at the end
other
of that,
times it's just like, yay, another evil villain who will escape and rue the day. God.
but it's like, even
And that's one of
even
those
at the
things
end
that
of the
as
Dark
soon as
Knight,
you
he
reach
still
that,
wins.
as soon as you
Batman
reach
won't kill him.
that, I don't know. You've got to balance it, where sometimes you need to like let the players win, man.
Oh,
Villain does need
to
to
me,
not
the most
lose.
important thing about writing villains is always to remember that the villain isn't there just to make the player miserable. I mean, especially in Stowe, because you can't really write a villain to be a personal antagonist to the player, just because it doesn't really work that well. But see, it's one of the things you see in comic books. It doesn't work well in Stowe, but but villains always have something they want to do. I mean, Lex Luthor wants to kill Superman, but he also wants to rule the world. So he has to kind of balance those two goals with each other. And
Sorry, what a great. It's surprisingly true. As like extreme as those goals sound,
Fucking
villains have they probably have all the same. Interestingly enough, all of the same little issues that we do. He has to balance how much time he's going to spend trying to kill Superman versus how much he's going to spend trying to design plans that will help him rule the world.
Greendragoon, did your Stowe crash?
no, I timed out. I was sitting around for too long.
We're right at the end of our 2 hours. We're trying to keep these to 2 hours or less. So I think
I do want to say one last thing on villains.
Go right ahead.
And this will be a good question for people to bounce around in their heads because we don't need to discuss it. But
we always like to leave with a question.
The question is, now, can the good villain not exist? Can it be something that isn't a real person? Can it be the environment? Can it be that's the Foundry mission challenge I want to see. Foundry missions where there is no villain.
Well, I've tinkered with writing non-villainous antagonists in stories just because.
But I mean, like, no physical bad guy. It's just, I mean, you can fight people, but there's no specific evil thing. The enemy, the opponent could be the environment, but does a villain have to be a person?
Nah.
That was actually a discussion topic we had at some point last year.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of.
I wanted to see that in the third one of the new Star Trek movie series.
Yeah,
something without a villain.
Yeah.
I actually wrote one of my Foundry challenge missions to be a straightforward exploration mission where you basically find a ghost ship and figure out what the thing is and where it came from, and there is no, actual villain in the piece.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question to leave everybody with. What are sort of the different ways you could write a mission without a villain? And maybe a thumbs up, and we'll see them on the air to the most interesting ones.
Yeah, and I like it. Good question to leave with.
All right, everybody. We will say good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Good night. And Hippie's the one who brought